Hey guys, so the new Cyberstorm access format is upon us, so as usual I thought I'd bring another Cyber Dragon deck profile and how to combat this current meta. Now before I continue, actually a big thanks to LDB Duel for hooking me up with this really cool Cyber Dragon deck box. I think the artwork is really nice, and of course you can always just flap this thing off and then the actual deck box is inside with, you know, the whole tray and a dice tray and everything. So a big thanks to them again. If you're certainly interested in it as well, you can always use my code Hakuna10 at ldbduel.com to get 10% off. I'll link that down below. Anyways, in terms of the Cyber Dragon's strategy in this current format, it's a little interesting because on one hand, you know, let's say with Superheavy Samurai, they sort of end on something like, let's say, Spell Cancer or Therion, which are machines, so you can contact fuse them away. As for the Purrely matchup, you know, Cyber Dragons have always been able to search a Kaiju in Jizukuru, so in that sense, it has some bright spots, but of course, you know, to be realistic, it's still going to be an uphill battle with this strategy in today's game. But at the same time, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there like me who love Cyber Dragons who will continue to try to find a way to play it. So let's get right into the profile. Alright, so let's just get right with the main deck, and a big thanks to LDB Duel for this amazing playmat as well, on top of the Cyber Dragon deck box. So we're of course going to start with the 3 Cyber Dragon core. That's very standard, same with the 3 Hers. I actually decided to go back to 2 Naxxra. I've always played this way, but recently I started going with just 1, because it was technically enough, but the thing is, you know, with Clockwork Knight, I kind of want to maximize just having bodies nowadays, and also I'm trying to focus this build in terms of going more OTK kind of strategy in terms of just purely, or at least the main focus, which is something I haven't really done in the past. We're of course playing the triple original Cyber Dragons because we are going to be playing the machine dupe package as always, and then we're actually, as I mentioned earlier, because we're going to go for that OTK route, at least as our primary focus now, instead of sort of like the grindy game that I used to like, and we are going to play that Cyber Dark Chimera, which is one of the newer cards in that structure deck that came out a couple of years ago, which gives us access to Power Bond, and of course the double Galaxy Soldier, which of course is something that's always been seen as the honorary Cyber Dragon to allow for the Nova Infinity plays. But the other late machines, and this is a card you usually play for the most part at 1, but now I'm actually going to maximize it at 3. It is searchable off of Repair Plant, but in this format right now, Kaijus are pretty popular to begin with, especially against Purrely. It's kind of hard to out a lot of instances, and also it also helps that it's a light monster, so that you can always pitch off Galaxy Soldier if you do not need it, but it's just nice to have. And actually kind of related to that, I decided to play the Pank as well as the 1 Alpha, just to have some bodies where, let's say for example, it's a super heavy board, and if your opponent has something like, you know, if it's like an exterior, you can like at least attack over it, or if it's something like Spell Cancer, obviously if you have the access to Cyber Dragon bodies to be able to contact fuse, that's also nice. But you know, just having something that can attack over it or force out negates, that's always nice. Now if you do have Kurkar Div Incarnate, that's certainly an option to take out, let's say like any 3 of the 4 cards here, because you do want to play at least 1 Jizukuru for sure, but at the same time, you know, it is a pretty expensive card. If you don't have it, that's totally okay. And sometimes it's kind of iffy with Kurkar in this deck, because one of the weaknesses of Cyber Dragon is that it's not the most efficient in terms of hand advantage. So you know, like eating a negate and then just so you can sort of summon that Kurkar out, sometimes it might not work out well with this deck, and you want to just get rid of them right from the get-go. And the last of the monsters in this deck, at least, is the 3 Drolls. I'm not really playing any hand traps other than this, just because, you know, as a going second deck, and in this current format, I think just aside from something like Droll, which is very, very high impact, I wanted to focus more so on board clearance and also ensuring that we have a way to kill them that turn as well. And so Droll is definitely probably the best one in this format, and probably going to be main deck in most decks. So now on to the spells. Of course, we are starting with the triple Cyber Emergency. Should always be played at 3 in this deck, at least in a pure variant. Searches you that Cyber Dragon monster, and the Repair Plan is another searcher for you. It gets you that light machine. You do need a Cyber Dragon engraved though to be able to use this effect, but it's really nice because you can add that Galaxy Soldier for the most part in terms of your Nova Infinity line, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, it can search you that Jizukuru, which will certainly be a little more crucial nowadays with that Purrely matchup. We do have the 1 Rev system still. It's essentially like a Monster Reborn, but you can also special from hand if need be, but if you're special from hand, it does have to be the original Cyber Dragon. Or of course, playing the triple Machine Dupe, card that I absolutely love, gets you into your Nova Infinity line really easily, as well as, you know, enabling OTKs. Now of course, it's not like the past though. When you resolve this, your chances of winning are certainly a lot lower nowadays in this current format, but it's still nice to have. We have some fusion cards in terms of Overload Fusion as well as Cyberload Fusion. So a lot of times, we had kind of cut this back when like Dragoon was legal with, Dragoon is still legal, but when Anaconda was legal, but now we're kind of back to this strategy. And again, I'm kind of focusing on like sort of that OTK strategy. So aside from Chimera Tech Rampage, Cyber Twin is actually kind of nice to summon off this as well. And we also have the Overload Fusion, which is really nice. And of course, how can we forget about the Cyber Dark Realm as well as the one and only Power Bond, just to again enable that OTK. This is searchable off of Cyber Dark Chimera, and this card also allows you to extra normal that Cyber Dark Chimera, and it just enables core to essentially become a 1-card OTK if your opponent has like an open board. And how can we forget about the triple Clockwork Knight, which has actually been going up a bit in price because of that. In Superheavy Samurai, this is a card that they can set so that they can kind of have their plays live if your opponent plays 5 Rainbow Magician, which is essentially a Mystic Mine against Superheavy Samurai. And so this card is really nice in Cyber Dragons, especially because it, changing everything to machines, which means you can just contact fuse away everything that your opponent has in terms of monsters and bringing out a very big fat Chimera Tech. Now the thing though is this can conflict with Machine Dupe because this does give attack boost for your baby Cyber Dragons, and so they'll be too big for Machine Dupe, so you do have to play Machine Dupe first. So that's one of the conflicts I do not like, and as it's not that entirely straightforward either, we're in terms of playing this first, because sometimes you do have to like try to force out those negates or something, so it's a little bit iffy, but it's still, I think, really good to have. Now the other card I decided to play in this format, and it's something because I've been playing Branded a lot lately, is that I really like Super Poly, and this Cyber Dragon deck has always been known to have a pretty flexible and lenient extra deck size, and so Super Poly I think is really nice because let's say with like Super Heavy Samurai, if they end on like something like Appaloosa, Barone, as long as they don't have a spell cancer, which you can honestly get rid of with Contact Fusion anyways, you can go into like Mud Dragon for that Appo or the Barone. And also against like Branded, this can actually stop that gimme puppet lock play, because if they end on something like Mirror Jade and the Granule on the draw phase, you have turn player priority, so you just super poly those 2 targets away for that Dragostapelia, and then now they just do not have another fusion for the most part. Now of course, ironically enough, if they don't open well or they get interrupted and they only end on Granule with the Expulsion, then you will not be able to super poly, but that plays there, and this card is just really crazy. Just some other board breaker in Harpy's Feather Duster, just clear back row, no limitation. Lightning Storm is also kind of nice too, but I decided to just stick with the one Feather Storm. This might be a little conflicting for some of you, but I decided to still play the Pot of Prosperity. And even though, as I said, I'm trying to go for a more OTK focused strategy, and Pot of Prosperity would kind of restrict that, you can still technically OTK under Prosperity. But the thing is, this deck has been always known to have brickiness issues because it always requires like 2 specific combination of cards for any of its plays to work. So it's better to play at least something, or have at least some kind of play, and maybe you don't kill them, than just not being able to play at all because this deck will break. So that's why I decided to still play the Prosperity, and then of course just the one Overflow in terms of again, because we're going more of a OTK strategy, it might not come up as much as before, but at the same time, a lot of times when you don't kill them and you can still have at least like a pop or 2 on top of like the Infinity to prevent that clapback, is something that you definitely need in this deck. Okay, now moving on to the extra deck, not much has changed for the links, of course. All Mirage, of course, you really needed to get the Baby Cyber Dragon Grave, Anima, because hers and Nax are level 1s, and Seagull, which becomes even more important now that I'm playing like that Power Bond package with the Cyber Dark Chimera, really comes up a lot more in terms of decaying. Xyz kind of changed up a bit. I'm actually only just playing 1 Infinity now, double Nova. I'd like to play 2 Infinity, that's how I've always done it. Problem is with super poly targets, it becomes a little bit more tighter. Now the thing is, I decided to prioritize double Nova because this can actually come up in terms of summoning both in the same turn, and this actually has an attack gain effect, which does not get used too often, but I've definitely used before, and it's become very clutch, and something that you have to always remember and can make the difference in terms of taking that game. And of course Zeus, board clear, especially if you just cannot OTK that turn, but you have to just clear boards, really nice. And it's also a machine, which for the most part doesn't really come up, but it's there. In terms of the fusions, we have double Chimera Tech Fortress. I'd like to play 3, especially because of the Clockwork Knight thing and just contact fusing everything. For the most part, you should be okay with just 2, and hopefully you're just kind of killing your opponent from there. And of course, the 1 Mega Fleet. For the most part, since Master Rule 5 came into place, this has not been as predominant or at least relevant, but at the same time, this format, at least Appaloosa, is sort of coming back again, so at least it's there to get rid of that. Kinetic Rampage, this is going to be your key enabler in terms of your OTKs. Essentially, is going to be able to attack 3 times, and if you power it up through either something like Powerbomb and or Seeger, it just becomes really, really strong and can also pop back row, which is nice to have. So really, really good card and definitely worth playing. I decided to play Cyber Twin instead of the double Rampage, which I always like to play double Rampage in a pure Cyber Dragon build, but I decided that, you know, with the Cyberload fusion and just trying to prioritize that OTK, if you have an open board, like Cyber Twin becomes really, really good and can really kill your opponent really fast. And of course, the triple super poly targets. I ideally did not want to play Dragonrider and just have room for another card in the extra deck, but the thing is, as I mentioned earlier, if I'm playing super poly, I might as well play this just to be able to stop that gimmick puppet lock, which is really, really deadly, especially as a going second deck. So these are really, really nice to have, and overall I think it's pretty solid. There are other cards you could consider in the extra deck. For example, there's Chaos Angel, which is kind of a new card, essentially as a sinker, and you can kind of use like any light or dark monster that are not tutors and treat them as tuners, so you can play it. Honestly though, it's more of like, it's not really needed at all, but it's kind of nice to have. But you might as well play something like Pallades or something at that point, and the rank 5s will probably be more relevant. And lastly, for the side deck, which is a bit important with Cyber Dragons because you are playing a going second deck. So for one, I decided to just have some more back row hate, especially quick play, so that, you know, you can play going first or second in case your opponent forces you to go for pro set, which you have to be prepared for. And that's why I decided to go Droplet as well instead of the Dark Ruler. Again, there are certain boards where, let's say it's like monster heavy, so you need some kind of monster negation, but at the same time, again, if they were to force you to go first, then you have something that you can still activate as well. Now in terms of I decided to just run evenly in the side instead, again, because in the main I'm more so focusing on that OTK synergy or strategy, but at the same time, if it's something like a really big back row kind of deck, it's okay if you don't kill them right away. Ideally yes, but you want to just at least clear some of their back row away. Another really important trap is D-Barrier, and this is actually decent going second as well. For example, let's say against Branded and you get Gimmick Puppet locked, you can at least set this and you prevent your opponent from playing on their turn, and then it just comes right back to you and you can try to make some plays. And of course against Purrely, this can technically, you know, try to stop that Noir, but of course they can always like shuffle in your end phase when you're like set this, but you know, it's there. Another card that's great going first but can actually be sneakily really good going second as well is Rivalry. This deck is predominantly machines, right? Especially with the in combination of Clockwork Knight, this becomes sort of like that zombie world lock in a way where, you know, your opponent's monsters, they become machines. So if they're not playing a machine deck, now they're kind of stuck because of Rivalry, because they control machines on the field, but in their hand, whatever their deck they're playing, they're probably not machines. And also going second, it can be pretty good too. I guess I'll just use Brandon as an example again, is that, you know, even if you get Gimmick Puppet Lock, whatever, you just like set this and on their turn you flip it, it can be really hard for them to play under Rivalry. And so it's a really nice card to have against certain matchups, I guess, especially against Rogue, it can be pretty dead, but that's why it's in the side instead. Alright guys, so that was it for the Cyber Dragon deck profile for this current Cyberstorm Access format. Obviously the ban list has not dropped yet at the moment, but if it does, the list is probably still safe, other than maybe something like Super Poly, worst case scenario. But either way, thank you again so much for watching, and again, a big thanks to LDB Duel for that Cyber Dragon deck box, and well, take care guys.